question that way. If you're dialed in on the phone line, you should have received a audio pin, and then you can hit the pound, your audio pin, and then pound again. And then once you do that, you can raise your hand and we'll be able to unmute your line. So 2 different ways to ask questions, and we will do questions towards the end of the presentation. So Janine, I'm going to give you control now. All right.
Great, thanks, Vinny. So today we're going to talk a little bit about DRGR as it relates to any of the cleanup stuff that you guys are currently going to be working on for NSP1, NSP2, as well as any closeout information that you guys also might want to be entering. In saying that, I want to just kind of go over just in general closeout guidance review. We also have on the phone Ryan Flannery, Jennifer Hilton, and Jesse Hanforth-Combe, and so they might be jumping in and out of this to provide any further guidance, any more updates, etc. As Vinny mentioned, we will be providing a Q&A time at the end of the call, so please be sure to ask any questions that you have either on cleanup and closeout or on any other DRGR questions that you might have. Just to review for the closeout guidance that you need to draw and spend all of your line of credit, expend the amount equal to or greater than your original grant amount. You need to complete and meet a national objective for any project with every penny of line of credit funds. You need to show that the amount equal to 25% of the original grant made up of any combination of PI or program income and line of credit funds was spent to meet this set-aside requirement. One note as well is many of you are going to need to comply with the period of affordability, and closeout, excuse me. At closeout, grantees will need to list the start and end date for all their NSP properties, and this is true for many other programs within HUD as well. Currently in the system in DRGR right now, there's no way for a grantee to enter the start date of the affordability period. However, the feature will be added, and I want to, at the end of the show you guys some mock-up screens that HUD is currently in process of developing to get some of your feedback on. So you guys will get a little bit of a preview of what those screens will look like prior to them going online via this webinar at the end. Generally, and please note here I'm saying generally, the affordability period begins when the unit is occupied with an eligible tenant, and then multifamily rentals affordability period generally begins when the property reaches stabilized occupancy. As always, review notifications, regulations for further guidance. The NSP closeout guidance for DRGR is within 90 calendar days of the date. It is determined that the criteria for closeout has been met. You will, as a grantee, be spending to HUD your final QPR in the system. HUD will then cancel any unused portion of the awarded grant as shown in DRGR and the signed grant closeout agreement. Minimum annual reporting requirements will continue. Initially, these will be in DRGR, but have many of you heard that in later times they will be that the information will join your CDBG reporting requirements within IDIS. For all the closeout, all the nitty-gritty of all the closeout information that you might want to know, here's the URL for you to go ahead and look at the published notification from HUD about NSP closeout. There's also a few webinars that you can also access via the 1cbd.info and that were specifically on closeout. Today the goal here is to talk a little bit about program income, voucher revisions, expenditures in the QPR, and performance measures in the QPR. So let's just talk about PI. Many of you have already figured out the program income system. I just want to review it very quickly on a high level and then talk a couple of details for you just to ensure we are all on the same page with regards to program income. It's essential for those of you that are generating program income, that you understand how the system works and you're accurately using it. Without doing so, it may not show HUD as well as your citizens how and what kind of funds you are able to generate off this money and how you're now using the program income. So the program income in the system had an update maybe about 9 months ago now, where it basically became a really robust system for you and for program income. On a budget level, it allows you at the activity to budget and obligate funds for your program income to be a lot more interactive, meaning that you don't have to go in and out of the system so much. You're able to actually estimate what your program income is going to be bringing in for budgeting purposes so that you can spend down as you estimate your program income budgets. It also complies with the requirements for the spending program income first. As many of you guys know, first in, first out is the program income requirement for your cash management. And so the system now allows you to comply with the requirements for this first in, first out requirement. By doing so, it allows you to create a means to identify organizations that a grantee allows to retain program income and not return the grantee for their own uses. These are called program income accounts. Many of you might have a sub-grantee, especially states out there, might be providing funding to a city or a county, and that city or county, via your contract, has allowed them to keep their program income and recycle the program income at that city or county level and not return it to a grantee. This does not mean that you do not, as a grantee, still need to record that program income. And so by doing this program income account setup, you're able to record that income and show and demonstrate how a grantee is keeping their money and retaining it. It also identifies each program income transaction rather than recording amounts at a quarterly basis as in the past. And lastly, it creates a means to identify any revolving loan funds. I know a couple of you have started and set up an RLF or a revolving loan fund, and it allows you in the system to create at the project level a revolving loan fund. Vinny, I'm struggling here on getting to the next slide. Can you please get me to the next slide?
Sure. Sorry about that.
No problem.
If you do the back and forth keys on your, it should work pretty well.
Great. So you're going to be estimating your budgets for program income at every level that's in DRGR. That's the grant level, the project level, and then the activity level. However, it's done a little bit different from the grant level versus the project or activity level. So let me just walk you through that to verify we all understand how to do that well. At the grant level, you are given a grant amount, which is your line of credit amount. And then you need to go in and estimate your program income and revolving loan funds in, again, the grant level, which is going to be in your action plan. And by doing so, it will give you a new total budget. As you see here, we have a $10 million grant award. Then we have an estimated program income revolving loan funds for $2 million, which now gives you a total budget of $12 million. Please note that at this level, at this grant level, is the only level in which you will see the breakout between your line of credits and your estimated program income revolving loan funds when you're budgeting. Now for budgets for projects and activities. This is done the same way. So for total budget and activity budgets, you must include both your program funds and your estimated program income. I recommend you reevaluate this regularly. Some people are actually doing this quarterly to ensure there's enough funds to accommodate both your project and activity budgets. It really depends on how much program income you're generating at a given time. Some people are generating quite a bit every quarter, and so it's a really good idea to reevaluate what your plans are for your program income. Some of your grantees actually have a real clear plan for the next year. You believe you'll get $1 million in a program income, and you have a real sense of where that program income is going to go for on the budgeting. I'm not talking about cash management, but on budgeting, meaning you want that extra $1 million to be budgeted for some more eligible use B. So important here to think through what that's going to look like ahead of time and estimate. Here's some fun math rules for you. For a project or activity budget is program funds plus estimated program or revolving funds, and your total budget, which is your grant funds plus your estimated PI or LF, revolving loan funds, has to be greater than or equal to the sum of your total project budgets, which is greater than or equal to the sum of your total activity budgets per project. Let me just walk you through that. Let's go back to that grant where it was a $10 million grant fund, and they had $2 million of estimated PI RL funds. So they had a $12 million total budget at the grant level. Your sum of your total project budgets cannot be greater than $12 million. Okay, so they have to be $12 million or less. And let's say at this point in time you have fully budgeted that full $12 million at your project level. You have two projects, eligible use B and eligible use E, and the sum of those two projects are $12 million. Then your sum of your total activity budgets per project cannot be greater than $12 million as well. Okay, so you got to think through this. Grant funds, then project budgets, then activity budgets. Talk a little bit about program income categories, and this refers to really the program income accounts and the revolving loan funds. Some of you, because you are working with subgrantees that are keeping and i.e. retaining their program income and revolving their program income at that local level, meaning they're doing first in, first out. They've been given the budgets in order to do so. In doing that, you set up program income accounts. And those are really separate accounts created by you as a grantee to identify activities under funding agreements, so those contracts that you have in place with a subgrantee that allow these organizations to retain and use PI on their own activities. In doing so, these PI accounts allow yourself as a grantee to wall off program income receipts for these specific activities. So it kind of allows you to keep those within the activities that that subgrantee is going to be using, and only that subgrantee is going to be using. For all other activities in DRGR, they automatically default to what's called the general account. And that is a pool of all your program income receipted that is not in any individual RLF or PI account. An RLF, again, is at the project level, and it's projects to identify activities of a single activity type where loan repayments are used to fund new loans. Let's talk a little bit about how to receipt program income. So program income received is recorded in the drawdown module as a receipt for individual program income transactions. So you're in the drawdown module, and on the left-hand side you're able to see you can create a receipt, or if you like to, you also can always go back and search any of the receipts you've done and edit them as needed. Here we've created a receipt, and you'll notice that you'll have to do it by grant number, and that's really important as many of you now have multiple grant numbers in your system. So always ensure that you are accurately recording your program income against the correct grant number. I personally find that's one of the biggest errors when people are can't quote-unquote find their program income. I hear that often. I can't find the program income I receipted. I often recommend that we go back and we either pull a MicroStrategy report, which is a report in the reports module of DRGR that allows you to look at your program income accounts as well as your receipts, and or you look at from the drawdown module that we are at right now, and you can search or edit your receipt. And recommend highly that you always double check that these grant numbers are accurate, because there has been an occasion where someone might be accidentally receiving your program income to your NSP1 versus your NSP3 or vice versa. So essential to always double check that. Second, then you always want to make sure you are receiving against the activity in which it was generated. And then you can make your own grant recipient number, or receipt number, excuse me, the receipt date, and then the amount. Always available here to put any comments you'd like to do into the comments section. To draw program income, again, you're in the drawdown module, and it's very similar to how you're creating the voucher for any funds from your line of credit. So it's the same type of creating the voucher system on that four-part system where you're going to choose activity types, figure out the actual drawdown amount you want to do, etc. However, when doing so, you need to make sure and ensure that you are choosing it from the program income and not from your line of credit. Big part here, though, that really stumps some folks out there, so I want to go over it carefully, is that you understand what this available amount is. Often someone will tell me, Janine, I have a lot more in my budget for an activity than what is showing me on my available amount. Why is it so much less? And the reason why it could be so much less is because the system forces you to draw down program income first if you have program income on hand within that program income account. Again, if you have not set up a program income account for that activity, then it defaults to the general account, and you would then have to look and see what program income you have there in the general account. I'm going to go over this very specifically for the activity here, which is NSP1B acquisition rehab. It's the last two lines on this voucher item, and it's for the Greater Denver Housing Help. Please note that this is all fictitious. And what we're going to be looking at is their program income, program funds. So you'll notice here that it tells me they can only pull down $25,000, and this grantee tells me, Janine, we have a lot more than $25,000 in this account. Why can't I not pull it down? So let's try to figure that out.
Hey, Janine, really quick.
Please.
Sorry. Some people are saying they can't see the really bottom of the screen, so I'm going to expand it. Hopefully, well, now they'll see my toolbar. Okay. If you click again, does it take away my toolbar? Yep, okay. That should be better. Thank you.
Great. Hopefully that helps people. Thanks for the feedback from everyone. So here we have the available program income amount, the draw calculations. On the previous screen, I'm going to go back. It shows you click on this available amount, this $25,000, and by clicking on that, it's going to get you to the next screen, which helps you understand how this $25,000 was calculated. Okay? So what we're reading here is it's telling you what voucher number. This is the voucher that they're creating right now. And it gives you the basic information. Always double check this grant number again. With so many grants that people are in DRGR now, it's a real stump if you get the wrong grant number. You'll notice that this activity has a program income account set up for it. It's called GDHH-PI account. And for this example, this program income account is specifically set up for the Greater Denver Housing Help. What I mean here is that the grantee has a contractual agreement with the subgrantee that subgrantee, the Greater Denver Housing Help, is going to retain their own program income and revolve it themselves, and meaning they are going to follow the first in, first out rule. However, as I mentioned before, they are required, the grantee is still required to report on this information in DRGR and pull down accordingly. And so what we have here is in the red, where it talks about the program income account, it tells you what is happening in this program income account. So to date, there's been $25,000 receipted against this account. There has been zero drawn, and so therefore there's $25,000 available in that program income account. As we know, first in, first out rules is that no money in the line of credit, meaning their grant funds or their program funds, can be drawn first. It needs to come from this $25,000 first. And that's what stumps a lot of people, because they'll say to me, Janine, I have $3 million available in this account. Why is it not letting me draw on? You have to see and understand what is actually available first.
Jeannie, can you click back real quick to the available amounts in the voucher screen?
Right here, Ryan?
Yeah. So one thing that grantees will see, users will see sometimes, and it's not showing up on this screen, would be an available amount in program funds as zero, showing as 0, and then the program, and for the same activity, an available amount through program income that actually is showing some sort of number. That's not technically incorrect, even though you know you have program funds. What it's showing you is that you still have program income in this account and receipts against this activity that you would have to spend first. And we don't have a function, like basically DRGR would have to predict the future in order to be able to tell you, based on what you enter into the drawdown amounts, how much you actually have available in program funds as well. But just so you know, as a system enhancement, we're looking to put a button in this screen that would allow for this to be recalculated, and that you enter the amounts that you plan on drawing for each line item, click that button, and then those available amounts will recalculate. So then you would see the program income. If you're drawing all of it, that would go down to 0, and the program funds that you have available for that particular activity in that account would populate the amount of program funds that you have left. So it's just something to think through, and it does confuse folks, but don't be freaked out if you do see a 0 for program funds if there is program income available for that activity as well.
When do you think that release will be happening, Ryan? Is that a pretty future release right now?
I'm hoping it's going to come in September. Fingers crossed.
I think a lot of people will appreciate that. I know it's sometimes a struggle to kind of recalculate themselves. I think that would be great.
But this is also a good time to let folks, or to kind of help folks understand and think about how they maintain their internal financial tracking systems, and how DRGR is really a reporting system and not an accounting system, and how you should really be able to tell, like based on your systems, how much you have available for a particular activity. So, we're trying to make it as helpful as possible in DRGR, but it's still something that you should be able to track on your own so that you don't get confused and you got to make that draw and things get held up because you're sending AAQs in and questions to HUD staff and all that.
It's almost like you have a reconciliation button. The button is to reconcile you against your own accounting measures. It sounds like the goal.
Right.
Great.
Janine, it's my fault. I'm going to close down my link so we don't get any more pop-ups.
Great. Thank you. Excuse us for 1 second.
Sorry, folks.
I'll keep talking though while Winnie closes this one section of his system down. So a lot of people want to know what good reports for financial information. The reports, to be honest, have changed so much in such a robust way. HUD has put a lot of reports on the reports module in DRGR since the start of NSP. And many of you that have used it from the start have kind of seen it grown from just a handful to many now. So I'm hesitant to always make a declarative statement of well, it's a great one and not a great one. I find that a financial report 05B is a pretty strong one with regards to getting your program income information out of the system in a robust and complete way. I give you the example right here where it shows you all your project information down to activity all the way down to your program income. As always, though, feel free to pull a couple of them, see what they show and give you, and you're always able to manipulate those reports as well. One key, though, is understanding kind of what the reports are giving you and where that information comes from. And I say that because many of times if you see any glitches in the system, you're like, why is that dollar amount $3 million? It should be 3.5 or anything in there. To pull a report is great, but also to know where the information gets drawn from out of DRGR. Which module is it? Because without knowing which module, it's hard for you to be able to correct any errors you're seeing. So let me just review that really quickly for you to remind you guys. So the grant funds budgeted, all the budgeting information at the grant level, activity level, at project level, all comes from the action plan. And remember, you got to think about that as now not just your project program funds, but it's also your program income funds now too in revolving loan funds. Anything to do with grant funds obligation dispersed or program income dispersed all comes from the drawdown module. Okay, your program income account, which shows your program income received information, that also comes from the drawdown module. I just want to make sure people understand that your PI account setup and anything you're doing to receive your program income against a PI account or against the default general account is seen in the program income received section, and that also flows into drawdown module. And lastly, and it's not shown here, but some of the financial reports has a column for expenditures, and those are still coming from your QPR. As folks are working right now on cleaning up their information and working towards closing out, a lot of them are realizing that there might be a discrepancy between their own accounting systems as well as what's in DRGR. And on the budgeting obligation side, as we know, there's kind of easier ways to reconcile that information by going into your action plan and making those modifications. I recommend, if you're doing so, to include that in any type of a narrative situation and or making it clear when you return and or submit, quote unquote, your action plan back to your rep, that you clearly state kind of what those changes are. It makes it easier for them to review as well as to understand any type of errors you had in the system. In order to do voucher corrections, it's a little bit more complicated. And I noticed that there is a decent amount of revisions going on in the system right now with regards to voucher corrections. I think a lot of people right now are doing that reconciliation from their accounting system to DRGR. I want to make sure and ensure that all information they have in the system is accurately drawn from the correct account, especially to ensure that 25% set aside. That's a major thing we're seeing these days, is wanting to ensure that grantees are accurately reporting on the funds they drew down. If they are set aside, then we need to make sure that the correct amount in the system shows the correct set aside. So I wanted to take a couple minutes to go through this voucher correction. Many grantees need to revise their original voucher amounts for several regions. As I explained, some is for the set aside. So basically, an original cost incurred are not for the correct activity. There's been an error in accounting and cost need to be moved to another activity, or had deemed something's cost ineligible. That's occurred on a couple of occasions for folks when they've had monitoring. So you have two options in order to do these revisions. The first one is which many people are taking advantage of, as they're revising the original voucher in DRGR and offsetting the next draw, or you can wire funds back to locks. I'm going to go over the to revising your original voucher in DRGR. So voucher corrections, you can do this on, or not can, you need to do this on a line item basis. You can make multiple line item corrections at one time, and your voucher status will determine which function to use. So you're either revoking an approval, you're canceling a voucher line item, or you're revising a voucher line item. Let's go a little bit through the voucher correction. I really strongly recommend when you're doing this voucher correction, especially for something that's a little bit more complex than just a quick voucher correction. You have one line item that you just need to increase or decrease very quickly. Many of you have multiple corrections you need to do right now, especially to ensure that your 25% set aside is accurately depicted in DRGR. And I recommend, if you're doing something that's multiple or complex voucher revisions, especially if they are going to mean your budgets need to change, that you really go to the reports module, pull out a financial report. For example, 7B or 5B are pretty good ones for this purpose, and you really map out those changes in Excel, and then by doing so, it makes what you do in the system a lot easier. Here's an example. This is kind of very complex. We're going to walk you through this also step by step, but some of you right now are at the stage you'd like to see this all in one snapshot. I recommend, for those that are, there will be, Vinny will tell you at the end of this presentation where to get the slides for this, and I recommend you kind of take this slide and you really walk through it step by step. You'll notice this looks very familiar. This is an Excel output page that we got from a report module, and kind of talking you through each step of what you can do to increase and decrease the amount that you need for the example I'm about to walk through. So for those of you that like it a little bit more in one spreadsheet and complex, go back to the screen when we're done here, and you can see it all in one. For those that need a little bit more step-by-step, I'm going to go through that exact step-by-step. So this is an example where the goal is to basically collapse activity 1A into 1B. Okay, so for whatever reasons, they set up two activities at one time, and they really need to make it one activity. And many of you are having that issue, or you're needing to basically revise a multitude of draws from one activity to another activity to show the set aside accurately. So here, the idea is we need to collapse 1A to 1B. So the end result, or our end goal, is to have $0, 0 budget, 0 obligation, and 0 draws in activity 1A. And we want to have $5 million budget, $5 million obligation. And right now for that activity, they've done $3.5 million of draws. Okay, so that's really our goal in this. And that's a good idea when you're talking about mapping out your revisions, that you literally map them out and you think, okay, where do we start, where do we need to end, and then I'm going to talk through how do we get there. So for,
if you don't mind,
please.
For the collapsing of activities, so there's been guidance out there that says, collapse activities, and we only look for the primary activity. In this case, there's an acquisition and a rehab activity. I just want to put it out there that we're not saying that you should go and collapse all of your activities if you set up like this, because that can be a lot of work, and it's on a case-by-case basis whether or not you really need to at this point, particularly for NSP1 folks who are just about winding down. So it's something to talk to your field office about, and if you have questions specifically about whether or not you should collapse the activities, feel free to either submit an AAQ on the 1CP Resource Exchange, or you could talk to one of us on the DRGR team here at headquarters as well. And we can work with your field office rep to determine whether or not you want to go through that process. But there are other ways to handle basically dealing with this over reporting of unnecessary activities that are in the system. Just wanted to put that out there. Okay?
Thank you, Ryan. That's great. And so for this example, we do use the kind of collapsing activity as the example, but please make sure you use this for other examples that actually would be required. And Ryan, I'm thinking the biggest requirement here is to accurately report your 25% set aside.
Correct, yes.
Yeah, so many of you, if you kind of have $2 million in draws on a non-set aside project or activity right now that really should be set aside, and you need to move some of that funding over, this is one way of doing that.
Correct.
So, great. So great point, though. I appreciate that, Ryan. So the example here is for step 1, you're going to want to move obligations and budgets within project A. You're going to need to borrow some of your money from project B. So let me just go back for a second. So now we got to go all the way to the project level. At times when you're moving money, if you're trying to increase, decrease, you have to look at what your project level dollars are and ensure that to move any money around, you might need to increase and decrease your project level. So I'm giving you an example where you can do that if you need to. Okay. So really your steps are move obligations and budgets within project A, which is step 1. Step 2 is borrow money from project B. Step 3 is zero out 1A. And step 4 is replace the money you borrowed. Okay? And here's some reminders. You got to remember your math rules here. For an activity, your budget is greater than your obligation is greater than your draws. Just remember it this way. If you've got a budget of $10 million, you can never have draws greater than your budget. So I always think of it that way. Just think of these math rules as kind of logic. And another reminder is your project budget cannot be greater than their sum of activity budgets. So again, your project is the hierarchy. It's a higher level than your activity. So if your project budget is $20 million and you have 2 activities, the sum of those can never be greater than your project budget. So let's talk a little bit about step 1, which is moving obligation and budgets within project A. So here we're going to decrease 1A obligation, because again, you got to decrease your obligations first, and then you can decrease your budget. So we're decreasing obligations in 1A, we're decreasing budgets in 1A, and then we're increasing budgets as necessary. Okay? And I highly recommend for those that really need to think through this, again, take this, walk through it yourself too afterwards, or if you are about ready to do any type of movement, and again, as Ryan said, if you want anybody to check your mapping out process of how you're moving money, don't hesitate to enter it into an AAQ, and someone can kind of check your math and walk through it with you. Step 2A, we're going to decrease the money in Project B. We need to borrow, quote unquote, some of your money, some of the money here. So we're going to decrease the obligations of 2A. And again, we're just randomly choosing 2A. We've got to remember where you're choosing 2A, and we've got to use that to increase later. But let's use 2A for an example here. We're going to decrease that, and by doing so, we're decreasing the overall Project B. Again, we're just borrowing during this step. Step B, we're going to increase to Project A. You'll notice the reason why is this allows us to now have a budget of $5 million. By doing so, we have a total budget of the sum of the two budgets of activities is $7 million, and it allows us to have this greater project budget. And by doing so, we're now able to move this draw over. Without doing so, we would not have had enough budget in order to do that. So at this point now, we're able to increase our Project A budgets and increase our activities also. We're going to zero out 1A, meaning we're going to zero out the, we're going to move the draws over first, and then we're able to zero out obligation and then budget. And we're going to, by doing that, we've automatically moved the draws over, and that's $3.5 million, and we needed to increase the obligations and budgets to allow that. Now we decrease, we're basically now kind of starting to decrease everything out. We decrease obligations, we decrease budgets, and we decrease our project budget to back with what we wanted to be at. But we can't forget that we borrowed some of our money from Project B, and we need to replace that and get that back up. And that originally was $13 million for the project, and Activity 2A was $6 million. So we've, quote unquote, given that money back. So I've kind of used a pretty simplistic example here. There are many different ways that you can move money around, but I wanted to show you here some key things to note. One is there may be a time where you need to, quote unquote, borrow money from another project or an activity when you need to do any of this voucher corrections. If you do so, you have to remember, this is why I really recommend you map this out, because if you do this, you sometimes forget at the end of it to give that money back. So please remember to think that through. A second item here is you have to think about this in this example kind of from right to left. Your draws always have to be less than your obligation, which is less than your budget. So when you start pulling money down and moving it around, you have to think about it in that math rule, because you can't just automatically decrease a budget if you have draws there that are greater than that budget. Okay? So an example here is on Activity 1B. I couldn't just decrease this budget to $1.5 million. Why? Because my obligations are at $5 million and my draws are at $3.5. So you have to think about this as all three steps. It's a budget, obligation, and draws that you need to evaluate what you need to do if you need to make voucher corrections that are going to cause any budget changes. Please note, many voucher corrections that you do will never create any budget or obligation changes at all at the activity level, let alone at the project budget level. I'm just kind of giving you guys an example of how to map something out if it's a little bit more complex. Some of you have utilized this to actually cancel a voucher line item. I find that to happen a lot when folks are at the point of have an open line item and they're realizing that they either did the wrong amount of that line item, that they're actually needing to wait to follow other circular rules like the 3-day rule that you might need to evaluate. So sometimes people cancel a draw. The big thing about doing that is you could only cancel, that option is only available to you if both you're a drawdown requester as well as if the line item is an open, approved pending headquarters, or approved by headquarters. So you see here in this action, you don't always see that cancel button. It is only if it's in those statuses. Here, literally in the system, is how you do a voucher correction. This is when you choose to do a revision. You'll get this screen come up for you. We've kind of given you a partial screenshot here, and it's under the Revised Voucher Line Item screen. So when you go into a voucher and you hit Revise, you'll get to Revise Voucher Line Item. Always, always triple check this box here called Line Item to make sure you're under the right grant number. And you notice I said this a couple of times now. Many people have many grants in there now, so double and triple check you're under the right grant number, because many of you are also using the same responsible organization. A lot of people are using the same activity types. There are only there's many you can choose from, but I would say there's a few that people use a lot. And so you really go back and always triple check this grant number and grant activity number. In doing so, it's actually quite simple in DRGR. I'd like to note I call it surprisingly simple, because by doing this, you're making a draw change here, and that's not a small thing. You always have to make sure that your accounting systems, you're matching and reconciling. You can set at all times. So in DRGR, it might be simple, but you always got to make sure that backup information, meaning your account systems, are demonstrating and showing this as well. So you're able to move funds to multiple activities. You can add multiple activities. So if you want this $25,000, it really should have been to 3 activities. You're able to include all 3 activity types here, as long as the sum of those 3 activity type amounts are not greater than $25,000, which was your drawdown amount. You'll notice here there's also a recalculate balance button here that can help you recalculate items in case you want to triple check you are doing everything correct and accurate on your amounts when you do your revisions to your activity number. And then also you can do a drop down to you actually are required to do a revision reason. So you're able to select from a multitude of different reasons of why you need this revision to happen. And you're also able to enter any comments.
So I mentioned the revision reason field is required. And this was actually created, we put this feature in response to an IG audit, but the comments are optional but recommended. So.
Great. The last thing I always recommend people to do whenever they're doing any voucher revisions, if that's big or small, I really recommend at the end of it all, you grab a report just to verify everything went through. I use 7B here, but again, there's a multitude of different financial reports you can do. You even have options to do it, financial reports and the system by vouchers. But here's an example. I just want to show you. I recommend it so that you can review this activity disbursement and verify that the funds that you wanted to have moved are accurately moved. So highly recommend you don't forget that last step. It could really ensure that everything got moved that you thought was going to be moved was complete. Every once in a while, sometimes it doesn't automatically appear in the report. Sometimes give it another 24 hours and pull it again and check it then. So we're going to move on to beneficiary data. Again, another major item that you need to have in your system that's accurately reported for closeout. And this is just trying to provide some help for anybody that needs to do any cleanup. So we're going to do some high-level information for you on beneficiary information and detail a couple of tools you can use for cleanup. Nothing is going to be new here. This is all a repeat of what you might have heard in the past. So all this information on closing out and cleaning up your data is quite, has been told a lot, but we want to just keep reiterating this to folks for anybody that needs additional help. As always, use the AAQ system under one CPD if you are wanting to get even more information or more help individually. So as always, your accomplishment information reflects what you put in the action plan as it pertains to what it's benefiting. Is it benefiting the area, or is it doing a direct benefit option? And so that really is going to affect the type of beneficiary data that you enter in as a grantee for your activities at closeout, or when you need to report on activities in your QPRs. So for many, if not most, NSP activities at this point in time are really the direct benefit, but there are some of the housing benefits. You always got to rely on that information. And I always say for folks on accomplishment information is it does come back to what you put in your action plan. If you said you're getting multifamily in your action plan, then that's the kind of information you're reporting on in your QPRs. If something has changed, you need to go back to your action plan and review and revise that as needed. Here's some information just to help you think through beneficiary measures. In the area benefit, if you're doing area benefit, you're either going to do it by census or survey, and you enter that data only as the action plan. These numbers automatically will calculate for you as a QPR, and it will equal those projected numbers. So it's a little bit more simple if you're using census, but you're using survey, you've got to double check you're using proper survey instruments. For direct benefit, the fair housing or equal opportunity screens, or the FHEO screens, those are, for example, race and ethnicity information that you enter in the QPR level. You will not see any of that information at the action planning. You're only going to be entering data at the QPR. And that information that you enter needs to equal your total households. So for example, if you say there are 5 Caucasians that have purchased the NSP homes, that 5 Caucasians need to equal your total households that you've entered into your QPRs. Okay? And we'll go through that a little bit more. Then also under direct benefit, you'll talk about your households, owner versus renter, housing units, which is multifamily versus single family, and you enter that data at both the action plan and the QPR. The action plan, you're just talking about what was projected. You're going to assume you're going to help 10 owners, for example, single family. So you're just talking about projected, but at your QPR, you're actually going to be entering your actual data. It's important to think this through for folks. So your DRGR, when you're putting in your actual accomplishments in the QPR, DRGR automatically does something for you. It automatically checks your cumulative totals for the total households for your race ethnicity data, and it compares it to your cumulative totals by income level. Okay, so I'm going to say this again. It automatically checks your cumulative totals. So everything you've done in any QPR in the past, it automatically adds those up together for both your total households from race ethnicity data, and it compares it against your cumulative totals for income level. And then it also checks your cumulative totals by tenure and by housing unit. So owner, occupant, or rental, and by housing unit, which is single family and multifamily. By doing all that cross-checking of cumulative total, the goal and the reason DRGR does that for you is so that you do not have numbers that are inconsistent with each other. If, for example, your cumulative total says you've done 10 households for activity A, it will not allow you to enter in 11 single-family housing units have been met if you only have 10 households. It will not allow you to put in 13 rental housing units if you only have 10 households. So the whole idea here is that it is doing a cross-check for you. It will not allow you to do that. Unfortunately, sometimes it's difficult to understand exactly what's happening when it does this for you. It gives you error messages, and you really have to kind of think through those error messages and what exactly is it telling me. And one way you can always get support on this is through the Ask a Question system in OneCPD. If you're getting error messages and you're not able to understand what it's actually saying to you, what is the error, what is that cumulative total inconsistency, I don't understand. So do not hesitate to go ahead and get a screenshot and send that in, and someone will hopefully be able to help you, I kind of say, untangle the mess. Many of you, though, have gotten pretty used to this and have been able to figure out these error messages and are able to use some tools from HUD. And so let me walk you through some of that. I just want to show you one example of an error message we've seen is what it says there is your cumulative sum of income levels. Okay, so this is all the past information that you as a grantee have put in at the income level data for your households total. So for the total number of households for your income levels, it must be equal to the cumulative total sum for owner total. So basically it's telling me this error message to kind of dissect this with you. It's telling me that if I was a grantee here, my household totals, I'm just going to give an example here, 10 again, that has to be equal to the owner totals, which again are not 10 for whatever reason. Maybe I'm just putting in 11 or 15 or 9. They have to be equal. Again, everything has to be consistent in the actual data of your QPR. Places you can check information. Performance reports. In the reports module of DRGR, there's a section called PERF or performance reports, P-E-R-F, you'll see. And performance report, or PERF report 01, gives you information per activity by measure type. This is an example where a grantee has a low, which is a low income, and they put their projected. Again, all of your projections are in your action plan, and then put their actuals, which is your QPR. And you'll notice it gives you both the low information as well as your total. Some people will have low, some people will have low and moderate because of maybe both serving low and moderate income households. So for that example, it would be all the low plus moderate equals total. And so every kind of report, every grantee might have a little bit of a different, how many measure types that they have, as well as different type of information on the columns. If, for example, it's low and moderate, it might just be moderate. You'll just need to make sure that you're looking at your own grant as it relates to what you need to show HUD. Perf Report 06, or Performance Report 06, shows your actual information in DRGR that you put in for beneficiary. This is an example where it shows you for direct benefits, and it shows you it by household type, specifically as it relates to household ethnicity, as well as female-headed households. So you'll see here total female-headed households as well as households total by ethnicity. You'll notice here we kind of cut some of this off because it was quite a big spreadsheet, but wanted to just give you, it not only shows you household by total, but it also shows you by tenure. So you hear households renter total. Okay? Again, everything has to be consistent. So if you only have renter households for one activity type, the renter households should be equal to your total households. If you're doing both renter and owner in activity type, then it's renter plus owner should be equal to your household totals. The only caveat to this is your female-headed households. As you might predict, not every household that comes in is going to be a female-headed household. That is the only time in the system for your actual direct benefit activity information that will not and does not need to equal your households. So give an example here. Let's say you have 10 white renter households, and that's your total households as well for activity A, but only 3 of those were female-headed household. This is a time where it will allow you in the system to only put 3 in, and it will never check your cumulative female head of households against your households. I haven't tried it yet, but I guess I assume that it won't allow you to do more female-headed households than what your household types are. And you'll want to just make sure that every information is accurate in the system. This is one good way of pulling your Perf Report 06 to triple check your numbers in here, and your Perf Report 01, or Performance Report. A lot of people say, I'm in the QPR right now, it's giving me kind of error messages, throwing error message at me. I want to see right now in the QPR for this activity, what are my cumulative totals? The system allows you to check that very quickly. Here I'm in the QPR, and I'm looking at a specific activity, and I'm in the Edit Performance Report, meaning I'm literally in the QPR editing that activity, and I'm able to click on View Cumulative Totals. And this would be on your first screen that pops up for you in a direct benefit activity. And it literally gives you your cumulative totals per performance measure. It tells you your beneficiary information, your owners, renters, low mods, as well as your race ethnicity data. You may have seen this before. This is we kind of just cut it down for purposes of this slideshow, but this is an Excel tool that HUD created to help grantees that were having quite a bit of beneficiary information in their system that was inconsistent, and they needed to make some changes. And this really gives you a tool for you yourself to kind of walk through step by step on what changes you need to make in the system in order to have all of your beneficiary information consistent with each other. Again, remember that female head of household is the exception to that, but all the other information needs to be consistent. And this helps you do that. And a lot of times what happens, and it feels a little bit Often you're putting negatives in and positives in order to get everything consistent. And so this tool allows you to do that. You'll notice, and we'll make sure and ensure there's a link here. When you get the slides, you'll be able to click on that link. And it's also, at the end of the show, we'll provide you and tell you where resources are for DRGR that you can access. But this Excel tool, basically what you do in step A, which is on the left-hand side, is it's what is it you want the system to say. So kind of ignore what the system is saying. What is it that is actually true in your own data? So this example, the top row is for low income. And so this example for this one activity is this grantee wants to show there's supposed to be 29 owners in this activity, 117 renters, and a total of 146. Okay? I'm sorry, not renters. 29 owners, low income, 117 moderate income owners, excuse me, and 146 total owners. There's no renters in this activity, and so your total should be mimicking exactly what your owner totals are. This example, 146 housing units should be single family, no multifamilies. So basically what step A does for you is you have to go back to all of your data, enter it into the Excel spreadsheet and say, this is what I want it to say. This is what it should be saying. And then in step B, you're going to identify the data that's already in DRGR. There's a couple different ways you can do that. You can do that by doing that View Cumulative Total link that I just showed you guys right here. You can also pull the performance reports, 01 and 06. And then you'll enter that information. So lo and behold, and then we see, oh my gosh, that we haven't put any of the ethnicity data. This would have been is all ethnicity data here in the big chart. We forgot to put any of that in. We have 29 female-headed households. That's in the blue down here. But we really wanted 27, so we've overput female-headed households. And for the moderate income owners, we put 106. And we really wanted it to be 117, so we got to make some corrections in here. Oh, and also, excuse me, for the housing units, if you notice in the yellow, we haven't put anything in single family. We put total 135, and that's just inaccurate for both of those. So what the Excel spreadsheet does for you is it automatically calculates C for you. And by doing so, it tells you what you need to start entering in information in DRGR so that you get no more error messages and you're able to clean up the system. You'll notice this is a lot of errors to clean up. We aren't seeing as many of these errors anymore on this level and this intensity of errors. However, people are still struggling a little bit. I recommend if you've got a lot of errors and you see, if you go through the Excel spreadsheet and you get this many errors in the system, you might want to think about using the Ask a Question and have someone walk it through with you. This is a decent amount that could trip people up. So try it. Feel free to go through the Excel document, even try it in the system. But if you're still getting error messages and it's tripping you up, don't hesitate to use that Ask a Question and someone will work with you. Just a reminder for folks in DRGR under QPR, you're going to be putting your expenditure data. Expenditures, all the stuff that you've drawn down to date, regardless of if it's in the system or not. Just want to remind people, although some of this is passed for the NSP 3, back in February, March, you were going to have 50% allocated. But just to remind people that you need to have 100% of your funds within 3 years of the funding availability date expended. So in the QPR, at every activity, you will have information that automatically draws or pulls in from your drawdown module, and then you'll have your expenditure information and your match contribution that you need to enter into the system per quarter, and then automatically will calculate your cumulatives for you. Again, showing you in Fin Report 7B that the activity disbursements come from the draws, but your activity expenditures, those are the ones that will come from your QPRs. So how do you complete activities in DRGR? We have some folks asking about that a little bit at this point, and struggling a little bit because they might have already hit complete on their activity status and now they're not able to do stuff in DRGR. So let me kind of walk you through this a little bit. Once you have in your own system, meaning program and accounting purposes, you feel that this activity has been completed. What we recommend you do is indicate this in your QPR narrative, reporting your final outcomes of the work that was completed. So make sure all that activity information is there, confirm your address information if applicable, make sure you clearly note in your QPR that you are completing this activity. Then in your action plan, you can use an activity status is a required field in your action plan per activity, and I believe many of them say underway. I believe it's underway, and probably the majority of your activities right now are underway. Once you've completed it, you'll go ahead and put complete here on your activity status at the action plan. However, I want to make sure you understand by doing that, it prevents any additional edits or financial transactions for this activity. So I really want to ensure that you make sure you are 100% complete with all of your narratives, your beneficiary information, specifically around your financial transaction. If you have no more money you're going to draw down from this, then you want to put this on complete status. Completed activities should continue to appear in the QPRs in which they are edited, but may drop off in subsequent QPRs. So we're almost done here. I'm just going to go over the resource pages, and then as promised before, I told you guys we have a couple of screenshots for you on a future release we'd like to show you guys as well as get any feedback on. First, your resources. Many of you may have known that there is going to be a switch in websites from the NSP website over to the 1CBD.info website. For right now, the NSP is still up and live and has a great section under Find a Resource that you can get all of your DRGR resources for yourself as an NSP user. So go ahead and head there. There's a section there on tools, and you can get a tool if you need to correct any of those actual activity accomplishment information. You can get that Excel tool right here. I've also mentioned on a couple of occasions that the 1CBD.info Ask a Question. There's an Ask a Question desk that is manned by TA providers and HUD, where you can ask any question you need on DRGR. You go ahead and onto the Ask a Question URL, which is 1CBD.info/Ask a Question. Go ahead and scroll down and go ahead and hit I'm an organization with a HUD program policy or reporting system question, and it will give you an option right there to enter your name and get your question in the queue. I'm going to go over for a second some DRGR release information. So what we have here, you guys might have remembered that I talked a little bit about affordability periods at the beginning, how you are required by being an NSP grantee to ensure that you are keeping track of your start and end dates for all of your NSP properties as it relates to your period of affordability. Currently in DRGR, they don't have a system yet up and running for you to be able to put that information in. It will be coming though. And these are screenshots to kind of give you an example of how that is. And again, we'd love to hear your input on that. You can go ahead and enter any input you'd want in the question section of this webinar, and we will collect that. You're also able to let your HUD headquarters colleagues know what your input is. Let me kind of run through what you're going to be seeing in future screenshots. This is the overall screen where you're able to edit address support information. So per address, you're able to put information in about the property status and end use information. I'm going to go ahead to the next screen, which is going to give you a bit of a more detailed view of this. So there's a section here which is edit address support information, and this is to help you closing up your proposed address level reporting information. So here we'd have by grant number, activity type, property status. We talked about if the property is underway, completed, or sometimes it can be canceled, and then any affordability start date and end date that you have, and any description of that affordability status. The screen would also show, again, this is all in proposal stage right now, the activity type for the end use. Got to make sure we note what the end use is going to be, the projected disposition date and actual disposition date, excuse me, as well as the national objective for the end use. The date the national objective is met and the deadline date, and then again any description of end use. Here's just another look at that and how that would work. Again, property status first, activity type for end use, and national objective for end use. So this again is proposed. This is not in the system just yet. This is what HUD is currently fleshing out in the system to show you guys a little bit of a preview about what they're going to be putting in for you guys to be able to enter your information as it pertains to affordability periods. Again, it's required for you guys to know and have on file your start dates, end dates for your affordability period, and by doing this, it allows you to do that in the system as well. Ryan, do you have any additions to this proposal information?
No, I mean, other than, like you said, it's still in the, this, I believe, actually came from our development pages, so this is still with the programmers, and it is, somewhat subject to change, so we are looking for some feedback on anything, looking at these screens. It's not a lot of information here, but anything that you see that might be difficult to use, or maybe some suggestions to make it more easy, we are definitely looking for that kind of feedback. And then also we'll be looking for folks who might be interested in testing. So if you are interested in testing or doing anything or providing comments, feel free to email me. You can email me at, I think my email should be on the end of this. If not, I'll provide it at the end. Or you can just let us know right now when we do our Q&A. But I think you covered pretty much everything that we currently know right now.
Great. And one thing I am going to scroll to is if you're wondering kind of where this edit address support information would come from or come into play, if you'll see here that enter the data, this is, many of you will recognize this as your QPR screen for the direct beneficiary activities. This is your second screen, first screen, I think it's your second screen still, and you would hit enter data here, and then you would get to the next screen, which would give you a lot of the information that you need to fill out for entering the address support information, like property status, activity type for end use, national objective for end use.
One thing I do want to mention, if you go back to that previous screen, is that sure. I know a lot of folks have addresses that are currently in the system that are either entered incorrectly or as placeholders, or maybe they need to be deleted, they didn't pan out, and nothing's ever going to happen. So we should be able to have that functionality available for the users to be able to actually delete those, because right now we have to open up previous QPRs. We're trying to build this out to where you can manage these addresses on your own. So I think it'll be a real functionality enhancement, and we can clean things up prior to closeout.
Great. Would that be part of the next release, or will that be in subsequent releases to the best of your knowledge?
Part of it, yeah, because I mean the screen that you would see right now, it should be editable at the address level, and then you can enter support data as well. So it should be editable, and it should be a part of the 7.7 release. Again, things may be subject to change. I don't believe that there's any reason why we can't do this just now, but if something comes up that may be that may inhibit it, then yeah. But as of right now, we should be able to do that.
Great. So I've taken a lot of time talking to you guys. I know there's some questions in the queue. Vinny, can you remind people how to ask questions, and then we'll go ahead and start getting to those?
Sure. So again, in order to, or if you want to ask your question, you can enter it into the questions box that should be on your toolbar for GoToWebinar. We are also going to take questions via the phone or through your computer speakers. If you're listening through your computer mic and speakers, you just raise your hand and we'll unmute you going down the list, and you can ask your question verbally. If you're listening over the phone, you should have been provided an audio pin. If you enter that, it's pound the pin and then pound again. that'll allow us to see you when you raise your hand, and we can unmute you that way as well. So those are two different ways you can ask your questions.
While I have you, Vinny, one person that did ask a question was, will we be getting this PowerPoint presentation that we walked through today? Can you let people know how they access that and what that looks and how they'll get that information?
Sure, yeah. Actually, in the last listserv message that we sent out for today's webinar, there should be a link provided that will take you to the PowerPoint or to today's slides. Also, in the chat box that you all have on your toolbar, there's a link there that shows you where to download today's slides as well. And of course, they're also on the HUD NSP Resource Exchange and on OneCPD Resource Exchange.
Great, thank you. So I've got a few questions that are written in, and I think we have a couple on the line. I'm going to start just going through some of the written in, then we'll go back and forth between those as well as those that people wanted audio ask their questions. The first question we have is, it's been a while since I tried, but our land bank activities did not allow me to select the area benefit. Is there something I'm missing? I had to select direct benefit, which doesn't make sense. Ryan, if I'm mistaken here, I thought they could do area benefit for land banking.
They should be able to, yes.
Okay.
I don't have an answer to that question without seeing screenshots. If I would probably just recommend that they send it on to the AAQ system and send screenshots along with it. Just in your action plan. So you have to go in your action plan, open up that particular activity, and show us the first and second screens as far as it not allowing you. Off the top of my head, I can't really think of any reasons why you couldn't, because you're supposed to land banking activities. I'm sorry, as area benefit. And I haven't heard of that being an issue in the past.
Nor I. So for that individual that asked that, sorry, we're not familiar with that still being, you mentioned that it's been a while since you tried. My recommendation is, Ryan, so go back in there, try again. Hopefully that's not a glitch anymore. If it is, take some screenshots of both the first and second page of your action plan for that specific activity. Send it in and ask a question, and someone will work with you. If they have to elevate that to headquarters because it's an actual glitch in the system, they'll go ahead and do that as well.
And Jeannie, we do have guidance on how to create a land banking activity in that accomplishments reporting guidance piece.
Great.
Right? So that might be a good resource if they, because they're technically supposed to set up 2 land banking activities, one for acquisition, one for disposition. And I'm not going to get into all the details, but it's a good resource. I would just go to the OneCPD Resource Exchange and type in NSP accomplishments guidance, and then there should be a section on land banking that you can take a look at to see if you have everything set up properly.
Great. Well, maybe what we could do, Ryan, I know that's been disseminated pretty widely, but after this we can, to all those that have joined us today on that call, we'll go ahead and send out that guidance once again to you all so you can have that easily in your inbox. Someone asked, if you previously completed an activity but realized it needs editing, how can you reopen it? I believe it's as simple as going back into your action plan in that status where you hit complete or you use the drop-down. You go ahead and revert back to underway, and it should work quite easily for you now to open it, and you can now have full access to that activity. Have you seen any issues with that, Ryan, or heard of any? I have not to date that that's an issue.
No, I mean that's how you would do it. If there's an issue, let us know. But I haven't heard of any issues related to that.
Yeah, nor I. So we apologize if you do, and you go in there and you go ahead into the activity status drop down in your action plan and move it back to underway, and you're still not able to do something. Again, go ahead and click on the screenshots and send them on in, and we'll try to help you. But I'm fairly positive if you just do that simple step, you should have access again to the system. We have an individual that has two questions. This is, what do you envision would be in the description of affordability status, and what if there's no planned disposition date? This person is referring to, I believe, the new the new proposed, I should say they're not technically new yet, but the proposed screenshots as it relates to the affordability. I don't think it has been fully fleshed out of kind of what are expectations around any type of descriptions that are needed. As of to date, this is not a required comment field, so I'm not too sure if there's an actual theory yet that I've been privy to that says what kind of a description is. I think, like everything, if there's any descriptions that you need to enter, if there's something kind of off, if there's something that doesn't exactly fit in the exact mode, I always find this description or those comment tabs are really good for that. So as of right now, they're not required fields, so I don't think there's an exact ideal of what should be there. I think it's more of an opportunity if you need to describe any type of an exceptions or any type of nuances to HUD. It provides an opportunity for you. Right now it says, what if there's no planned disposition date?
I would probably field that to Jennifer, but as far as, and correct me if I'm wrong, Jennifer, but aren't they supposed to at Closeout have plans for disposition as part of Closeout?
Sorry, could you repeat the question? I missed it.
So
No
at Closeout, aren't grantees supposed to have a plan for disposition of remaining properties? In particular, and the question was related to in the system, we're asking for a proposed disposition date.
Mm-hmm.
And so should they have, not only a plan for disposition as far as what they're going to do with it, but when they believe it would be disposed of by?
Right. I mean, you're talking about specifically for land bank properties?
This would be,
question?
well, I mean, in the system, it applies to everything. So I know that we discussed that for land bank properties, but yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess so. That's where the question that I have for you, is it just for the land bank properties, or are there maybe other properties that they're generating program income on, and they haven't quite figured out exactly what's going to happen, but they're ready to close out because they've spent all of their program funds.
Mm-hmm. I mean, for Closeout, they do have to have a disposition. They basically have to have a proposed disposition that's going to happen in 10 years from the closeout date. But the other properties, if they're spent with program funds, they can't close out until they have disposed of those properties. So there shouldn't be any properties at closeout that were funded with program funds that don't already have a disposition. So there would have to be, a date that would occur prior to closeout for them to be able to do that.
Okay. What about program properties that would be funded from program income?
For program income, I don't know. We're not requiring that. So if you have a project that was funded with 100% of program income, at this time we're not requiring you to have met a national objective in order to close out on those properties, but so you wouldn't really be required a closeout to say what the disposition of those properties is going to be. I don't know if that's something that you would have to do in the system to close out, but as it stands right now, they wouldn't have to do that if it was 100% funded with program income.
Okay, so that's a good question to the questioner. And Janine, can we go back to that screen where they show that, where it showed? Because I just want to see if it's a required field, because if it is a required field, this is one of those things. It doesn't look like it's required, no. Okay, so you probably don't have to enter anything, but for land bank, a couple
Right.
of these things we're still, again, this is one reason we're doing this, because that's a good question, a good comment. Do we have to make this do we have to make this mandatory for land banked activities, for example? So there are a couple of things we're still working out, but that's, again, thanks for the question. It's something to think about on our end.
Janine, the person who asked the question is actually raising her hand, so I don't know if she wants to elaborate on her question.
Let's go ahead and take that question. Thank you, Rennie.
Okay. Hi, are you able to ask your question?
Hello.
Hi.
It's Jane Seiden from the Community Builders, and I was the person who asked the question. So your answer has raised a further question, which is, it was my understanding that, when you say that we're required to have a disposition of properties, when you say disposition, do you mean a sale of the property?
I'm so sorry. Can you say that again? You're a little bit muffled. Can we try one more time?
Oh, got some feedback.
When you say that grantees are required to have a disposition for the properties prior to closeout, do you mean an actual sale of the property? Is that what you mean by disposition?
So this is Jennifer. Yeah. So for any property you have that has any NSP program funds in it, has to meet a national objective, right, before you can close out. So that means when we say dispose, we mean sell, rent, dispose of for, an other eligible use. So when we're using that term in that way, that's what we mean. We mean meet a national objective and dispose of it for an eligible use. So it could mean sale, it could mean rent if it's a house, it could mean meeting an area national benefit if it's, a park or something for NSP1, or what other eligible use you have available to you. Does that make sense?
We may have had a cutter just because of the feedback there. So if it doesn't make sense, please raise your hand again or enter a question and we'll get back to you. Apologize for that feedback.
Can always ask another question, type it in so we can follow up with you. So we apologize for the feedback on the line.
Why don't we go, Vinny, to any online questions that are audible questions that are coming in? If you can go ahead and announce those people and we can get them asking their questions.
Okay. There's just one more from Angela, and she's on the phone, I believe, so we shouldn't get any feedback. So I'm going to unmute your line. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Okay, my question is regarding entering the beneficiary data. I was at a training probably about a year ago, and they mentioned the fact that for the 81 to 120% of AMI, you don't actually enter that data in. It's only the low and mod. Is that true that we are reporting?
So that's not true. Let me qualify that though. I have a feeling I know what they were trying to say, and let me see if we can get there for you. So
okay.
In the system, it's a little bit complicated for you, and so hopefully we can walk it through. Also in this guidance piece that we just talked about that Ryan mentioned, there's a real good explanation of that, and actually shows you it on screenshots too. So we'll make sure that again when we close out this webinar, we'll send out that guidance piece to everyone that's on this so you can see exactly what I'm talking about via screenshots as well. But what it does in the system for you is that DRGR since DRGR's DR, Disaster Recovery Grant Reporting System, it was meant for disaster grantees. And so disaster grantees usually have low or moderate, and low being 0 to 50 and moderate being 51 to 80% of AMI. So there's a low section, there's a moderate section, and then there's a total section. So if you do it that way, then you think, oh my gosh, there's no 81 to 120, which is allowed in NSP. And so what you need to do in the system then is you need to account for the 81 to 120 in your totals.
Okay.
Okay, so I know that can be a little confusing to folks, but that's how you need to do it. Is there any updated information on that, Ryan, that I'm not familiar with?
No, it's the same. Nothing's changed.
So how do you reconcile that if, well, initially with NSP1, when we didn't really have this guidance, and we were actually accounting for the 81 to 120% in the moderate category?
So the beneficiary reconciliation, like prior period correction toolkit or tool that Janine showed, that's a spreadsheet.
With that spreadsheet, okay.
That's one way to do it. Yeah, that's the best way. That's the best process to undertake to change things. And you have to do this, for each activity. So.
Can you correct that in the current QPR, or do you have to go back to?
No, current QPR. Yeah, that's the way to do it. Definitely in the current QPR, and then you just have to save it once you're done. Okay.
And one more question, if you don't mind.
Please.
If we have activities that were completed maybe a year or a year and a half ago, but we have not actually marked them completed, is it okay to do that in the current QPR? But we've always done it in the narrative, said that the activity was completed, but not actually marked it completed as a status.
Well, the status actually, the status is actually done in the action plan.
Well, that's actually where you can put in a date, like it said completed date, and you actually put a date in.
Mm-hmm.
So my question is, if we haven't done that in the past, but the activity was actually completed maybe a year or so ago, what date do we actually put there? The actual date or the date of the QPR that we are entering?
Good question. I don't think I've heard any guidance from you guys, Ryan, on this one. I guess I assume you put your actual, but is there any negatives to that or any issues that you would have with that?
No, you know, you put it in the actual date it was completed, and then in your narrative section you would explain that you know you had not done this yet, you had not officially switched the status, and you were accounting for that now.
Okay.
So that's probably the best way I'd go about doing it. You'd want to talk to your rep about it too, just to let them know what you're doing, keep them informed. But I don't see any, you know, there's no major, you know, repercussion or anything.
But it will allow us to backdate, I think.
Yeah, it should.
Okay.
Yeah, it should.
Okay. Okay.
And just to your question about the guidance for that low mod, middle, and having to now kind of go back to that information and do some accomplishment. Again, check out that guidance piece just to see all the screenshots. And if you feel like you have a lot and you want someone to go through at least a couple with you, don't hesitate to ask a question or ask for some technical assistance.
Okay. Thanks, guys.
Great. Thank you. Vinny, I know we have people still writing in. Anybody else on the phone before we go back to write-ins?
I'm sorry. Janine?
No one else on the phone?
Oh, no, not at this moment. Sorry.
Great, thanks. We've got some write-ins still, so I'm going to start going for those. This might be a question, Jennifer, more in your vein. It, I think, has a little bit less to do with DRGR. So for this one, it says, if we did a financing mechanism project for low mod persons to purchase foreclosed homes that served over 900 households, will we have to enter affordability periods for all of those properties?
Oh, wow. Yes, they should write in because it depends on the how much direct assistance they gave to each home buyer, and yeah, I mean they're going to have to put that data in the system. So I think someone like that, it'd be a good idea to maybe write into the ask a question box, and we can, or you know, even ask for TA, and we can help you out with that. But yeah, if you're providing direct assistance to home buyers, you've got to record that in the system.
Great. So that level, it sounds like, Kathy, why don't you go ahead and write that in either in technical assistance or ask a question and see what we can do to get some support for you on that. So we have someone that's written in a multi-part question, so let me kind of break this down. So if you have an activity where you want the PI to be used to fund only new activities of the same type, would you set up a PI account or an RLF? So you only set up an RLF if it meets the requirements on the rules for revolving loan funds. So I really caution people not to assume that these are one and the same, and really step back, review. It's really based on CDBG rule and regs. So review your CDBG rule and regs with respect to revolving loan funds. So do not think of that as one and the same. Although in the system they might feel the same, they're not the same as they relate to rules and regulations. So again, this is kind of where DRGR is a tool for reporting, but is not a tool as it pertains to rule regulations and accounting systems. So in saying that, I'm going to assume here that you are not going to meet the revolving loan fund requirements. And so if you have an activity where you want the PI to be used to fund a new activity, then you would need to set up a new activity in DRGR. and ensure that that you budget just, you have there, your budget will just include program income budgets. You would only set up a PI account if the funds for that activity is going to a responsible organization, i.e. one of your sub-grantees, that is going to retain that PI money and use it, quote unquote, themselves on those eligible activities as it pertains to that. Again, you don't just randomly set up a PI account or an RLF account. You only do it for the instances that are PI or RLF. So if you're, for example, needing a new activity you've never done, you're only doing acquisition rehab, and you want to now do redevelopment using your program income, you've got to double check the rules for any substantial amendments and working with HUD if you're going to do a whole new activity. So again, DRGR, it's easy to create a new activity. You always go back to the rules and regs. Can I create a new activity? Does it going to be a new substantial amendment or anything like that for public viewing? Once you figure all that out and you put a new activity in DRGR, and let's say you're going to use $2 million of program income funds, this will be a new budget. Your budgeting in DRGR at the activity level is program income plus program funds. So if you have 0 program funds and $2 million of program income, you would set up that activity and just say it's a $2 million activity, new activity. If, though, that activity is related to and is being worked on by a sub-grantee, a responsible organization that is allowed to retain their own program income and use it for those purposes, then you'd want most likely to set up a program income account for that activity, for that responsible organization. And you'd only set it up as an RLF, that new activity, if it meets the requirements of a revolving loan fund. Okay? They also asked, how do you set up a revolving loan fund again? So if you're meeting the requirements of the rules and regulations of CDBG, because that's what the NSP program, quote unquote, sits on top of for many things such as the revolving loan fund, if you meet those requirements and you want to set it up, you actually do it at the project level. When you're setting up a project, there's literally a little button that says, is this a revolving loan fund? You go ahead and check that, and based on that, you would be setting up a revolving loan fund.
And just to reiterate, the distinction here between a PI account and the revolving loan fund is the PI account is set up to essentially revolve the funds within a responsible organization. The PI account, the PI funds would only affect the activities that fall under that particular responsible organization that you have a grant agreement with that says they're allowed to retain program income. So it's a one responsible organization most of the time to PI account. The revolving loan fund, again, like Janine had said, as long as you're actually creating a revolving loan fund as per the regs, that would be at the activity type level. So you would be able to select multiple responsible organizations that might be carrying out an acquisition rehab activity type, and the funds would revolve based on that activity type. And the program income would revolve based on the activity type. So there is a distinction, and they are different. But it's really a lot of the time I've seen often that what a grantee is trying to do can be handled in the PI with a PI account. So if you have specific questions related to this, whether you should set up a PI account or a revolving loan fund, please write the question in. We can give you kind of general guidance on the calls, but we really need to look at, look in your system, look at what you're trying to do, and help you make a call there. And of course, loop in your HUD rep as well. They could probably provide guidance.
Great. The second part of the question is also to do with program income and revolving loan funds. If program income is generated and receipted to a revolving loan fund activity, can you draw other program funds if you have no expense to use for the program income generated in the revolving loan fund activity? Or do you have to wait to draw until you have expense in the RLF activity to cover the PI? So I'm just reading this question again.
Yeah, I need to hear that one again.
Yeah, so I'll say it one more time. So if program income is generated and receipted to a revolving loan fund, can you draw other program funds if you have no expense to use for the program income generated in the revolving loan fund activity? Or do you have to wait to draw until you have expense in the RLF activity to cover the PI? So if I understand this question correctly, and I apologize if I'm getting this wrong, but in revolving loan funds, if you have an activity set up in a revolving loan fund and you are generating and receiving funds against that revolving loan fund, then you're just able to revolve that as you earn. However, the one thing you cannot do, if you have a regular activity that's the same as your revolving loan fund activity, so let's say it's redevelopment as your revolving loan fund, and you have that same activity in your grant, then you actually have to expend that funds first, regardless if it's program income or budget funds, and then you go to your revolving loan fund. I'm not sure if I 100% accurately depicted that, but I believe that was your question. If I misunderstood your question, please feel free to raise your hand and we'll see if we can get you in the queue so we can understand it a little bit better.
Sort of sounded to me like they were asking if they could recapitalize their RLF with other funds that are available. And I don't remember off the top of my head, to be honest with you.
Say that again. What did you think the question was so I make sure I hear?
I'm sorry. It sounded like they were asking if they can recapitalize their revolving loan fund. If all, program income, all funds are expended within that revolving loan fund and they need to pay something out, could they use funds from other activities that are not within the revolving loan fund? I don't think there's a system stop on that, but I don't remember from a policy standpoint whether or not, or a federal cash management standpoint, whether you're allowed to do that or a regulatory standpoint. So I would leave that to either Jen, or if we had Paul Webster, I would ask him. But I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, I agree there's no system stop as long as you have budgeted and received enough program income. There shouldn't be a system stop on that. Policy-wise, I believe, although I do recommend we double-check CDBG on this one, that if you're increasing your funding on RLF, you have to ensure that you are meeting any type of requirements as they pertain to public noticing, et cetera, i.e. making sure any substantial amendments might need to look at, et cetera. So I'd recommend we all kind of double-check our CDBG rules and regs on that one, unless someone else is on the phone. I don't know if, Jesse, you're still on to double-check this. I'm going to assume no to that. I have your name, Brooke, and we'll make sure we get you that answer afterwards. We'll make sure we grab your email and get you that. Thanks so much. Next question we have, we received information that indicated that the 25% set-aside applied to program income earned after October 19th, 2010. Hold on one second. I'm not sure if I understand this question. So we received information that indicated that the 25% set-aside applied to program income earned after October 19th, 2010, but that is not indicated in slide 3.
That's true.
So can you expound on that a little bit, Ryan?
Yeah, well, no, what she's saying is true, and it's not reflected in that. And unless anything has changed, I don't believe it has, but yeah, that's correct, that program income received prior to October 19, 2010 does not count towards, that requirement.
Hey guys,
so
this is Jen.
Yes.
Yeah, it actually does count. So yeah, it did change.
Okay, good.
So basically, yeah, we sort of announced this, I think on a webinar and some guidance. Yeah, the program income, there is no more like dates that sort of safeguarded the program income prior to a certain date. We had to make all program income for all the programs has to meet the 25% set aside, but you don't have to do that until you close out your grant is when we'll be looking at that information. So it's not due until then, but yeah, the program income you receive has to meet the set aside.
Thank you. I'm glad you were there because I was not up to date on that most recent guidance. So.
Nor I. And then also it says, also slide 5 indicates that any unused portion of the grant will be canceled. And a previous NSP closeout webinar indicated that HUD would help us to expend all of our original grant funds prior to closeout. Jenny, can you expand on that?
Yeah, so you basically won't close out until you've spent all your grant funds. So unless there's just literally like a de minimis amount that is not worth spending money on, you know, under $100, under $1,000, yeah, there's really no reason for you to close out when you have funds still in your program account. And, you know, we try to provide ways to or encourage grantees to sort of do strategies where they're spending their program income down fast enough so that they can use those program income or use your program funds quicker to get that line of credit drawn down if you're anxious to close out. But there's really no reason to close out quickly, and we won't force anyone to close out if they still have money in their line of credit.
Great. And so just to clarify for folks, that slide we talk about is that HUD will cancel any unused portions of the awarded grant as shown in DRGR and their signed grant closeout agreement. So this is that key part here where this is that closeout agreement that's got to be signed. HUD is going to work with you before any signatures happen and hope to not have to cancel any unused portion. Is that what I'm hearing, Jen?
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, great. And I have actually another question for you. I think it has more to do with policy than DRGR.
Okay.
It says, what happens to program income after the NSP grant has been closed out?
How much time do we have? Because that
right.
could take a while. Right. So the short answer is that if you are an entitlement, CDBG entitlement grantee, or have an open state CDBG grant, when you close out, NSP program income basically stays the same. All the eligible uses stay the same, the income levels stay the same, it's still NSP. There's some differences in reporting and the system, but as far as what you do with program income, it stays the same. If you are a nonprofit as part of a NSP2 consortium or a nonprofit grantee, then basically at closeout, you have 5 years where we're tracking NSP program income. And again, it stays the same. You have to meet eligibility requirements and national objective. But then after the 5 years, it is unrestricted miscellaneous revenue. So that is the short answer to that question.
Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
So we have an individual that's asking, will there be a master performance report that shows all addresses and their associated activity, long-term affordability, period status, affordable period start and end dates? That's a great question. As you'll notice, as these new releases in DRGR have popped up, HUD subsequently usually has, if they have that opportunity to, the time available, they look back at their performance reports and sees what potentially new canned performance reports a grantee may need. So I think that's a great suggestion, and Ryan, maybe we'll note that this person is asking if there's going to be a canned report that it shows the addresses as they're associated to the activity, and then any kind of the affordability status information that a grantee would put in with the new releases. So if you guys can maybe mark that down as a potential new report that someone would like, that would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, within the constraints of MicroStrategy and how some of the different attributes and metrics relate, I don't want to get too technical, we will make the most robust report possible available, and I think that all of those, you know, fields that were just mentioned would probably work together. So there will be reports, probably more than one, that show that type of information.
Great. You know, now I've found folks that sometimes, because as Ryan was saying, kind of on the back end, things linking and not linking in MicroStrategies, which is the system in which the reports module uses and sits on, sometimes they're not able to make an exact report that you might need. But I usually find if you can pull 2 reports, and between those 2 you actually get the information. I gave an example earlier when looking at performance measures that there is Performance Report 01 where I get a lot of the low, moderate total income as it relates to a lot of my performance measures. But then I'll pull Performance Report 06 to get the race and ethnicity information and the female-headed household information. So sometimes by pulling 2 reports, you will get all the information you need. Sometimes it's just not always in the same platform or the same actual report. Next question we have. We have a subrecipient that will be establishing a revolving loan fund. It's a new home buyer loan program with program income from 2 different activities. Can both activities designate the same revolving loan fund?
Well, let's again, if it's just one subrecipient that's doing this, this can probably be handled in the program income account function within the system. So I just want to put that out there. I'm sorry, but I kind of forgot. I missed the second part of that. What was the question?
One question though on that one. They did say though that they are actually establishing a revolving loan fund with this subrecipient. So I think, regardless if a PI account can handle it, would HUD still like them though to establish a revolving loan fund if that's actually what they're establishing on paper?
It's a good question. We've kind of gone both ways depending on the specifics of the situation, but typically the guidance has been related to if there are going to be multiple responsible organizations carrying out the same type of activity, then that's when they would set up the revolving loan fund. If it's an individual subrecipient carrying out one particular activity type, we would set up the program income account and pull just the one activity over. Again, we can hash out the details though because we might not have all the information just from this call. So regardless, we can kind of move on beyond that. But what's the second part of that question?
They were asking, can both activities designate the same RLF?
Well, that kind of goes back to what I was saying, because there you'd have the ability to pull in 2 activities under that program income account. So if you have one subrecipient carrying out 2 activities, then you can just, it's a really easy way to just pull in the 2 activities that are going to be revolving.
Great. So if there's more, if this gives you a general sense of what you need to do, if Ryan's answer is great, if you'd like to kind of talk a little bit more through details, go ahead and send an ask a question in and provide some of those additional details, and we'll be able to flesh it out even further with you. Someone's asking, Ryan, if you mentioned here about correcting addresses in forthcoming DRGR releases, and they were wondering if you could speak to that again. They missed part of that. Could you articulate a little bit about what you're seeing is going to be in the system with regards to making corrections to addresses?
Hey, guys, can I jump in for just a second? This is Jen. I just wanted to, on that question about RLS and doing different activities, I think just from a policy standpoint, the whole reason RLS were created and why it's a good idea to do them is so that you can segregate your funds into these RLFs by activity. So if there's separate 2 different activities, you'd want 2 different RLFs. So each RLF should be for a specific activity or for a specific subrecipient, depending on the best way to do that for your accounting systems. But you really shouldn't have an RLF. It's designed for one specific activity to revolve the funds for that.
That's exactly what I was trying to get at, and I guess the thing that I left out was, and Janine mentioned earlier, like not everything that you think should be an RLF will be an RLF. So you can probably handle this by your subrecipient agreement, by allowing them to retain their program income for only certain activities. And it's not an actual RLF, but that's the agreement that you have with your subrecipient. And that way they can set up this program income account for only 2 activities. So it's just, I mean, there's more to this. I think that it warrants further discussion, and I don't want to just put out, this is what you should do right now. I think you should definitely submit a question and talk through it a little bit more, because there may be other ways to deal with it.
Okay, that's
agree, Jen?
Yeah, I do. I think you're both right that to say that, I think we sort of all thought, oh, the RLF is the answer to disseminating program income, but it's really, not the end-all be-all for everyone. And I think Ryan and Janine are right that you should really look at the case, and we can talk it over with you about whether or not it makes sense for you to set one up or not.
Right.
And so what we're talking about really here, guys, is it's not we're not necessarily talking about if it's necessary in the system to set one up, but actually like regulatorily and what your program needs is a good idea to set it up, and then making that decision, and then making decisions on what to do in the system based on that.
Right.
So again, as I keep kind of mentioning in DRGR, so much of what we're talking about is out of the system, and then we figure out how to relate that or demonstrate what you've chosen to do programmatically and what you're required to do regulatorily, how you relate that to the system. So this is one of those examples again. Is RLF a good choice? I don't mean in DRGR is a good choice, but is a good choice for your program, and then once you decide that, how do we do that in the system?
And I know folks can sometimes get frustrated with that, but the reasoning behind that is the purpose for that is the fact that it's a flexible system that we use for multiple programs. So we can't be that rigid with how how you click and move through everything and try to tie it directly to regulations for any one program. We have the Rural Innovation Fund that is very, very different for CDBG, and so they would be tied to those regs as well, and so we can't have that. So that's why we do work together to kind of set things up the way that you need it, that works best for everyone and still complies with your rules and regulations.
Great. So I believe it's the last question in the queue right now. So some of our activities have duplicate addresses. They pulled a performance report 03, and they've noticed based on previous reporting that they have some duplicate addresses. Should I go ahead and use the correction tool now to correct data numbers and wait until the release of 7.7 to remove the duplicate addresses? And then they're also asking, when do you expect the 7.7 to be released?
Well, I think we still had that question about, for me to elaborate on the ability to edit the addresses, or did I get to that? I don't think I did.
Oh, that's a good point. I don't think we did get to that. Could we combine that all in one? Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's what I want to do. So currently, if you want to edit an address, we have to open up the QPR, and then those fields that you had once entered the address in are once again editable. They get locked down once you submit your QPR and then it's approved. So what we're hoping to have and what's planned would be the ability, and I'm not sure if it's going to be done through an edit address button or exactly how it's going to look, but the ability to make those fields editable in the QPR, and then, so you could delete an entire address, or you could make edits to a street, or whatever it is that you need to do, in addition to all those additional functions that you would select through that separate edit or add add additional information button for that particular address. So it's just going to be like if you had like a locked field that you had a button that said edit, and then you can click that button and then you can edit that field. That's pretty much as much as I know right now, but that'll be I believe in the QPR. As far as the second question, I would recommend, because of all the data analysis that we do, especially looking at the performance measures, that you make your performance measure changes, and then leave the addresses for now, the duplicative addresses, and just put into your narrative sections that there are some addresses that we've added multiple times. Excuse me. So I wouldn't be too concerned about that. We also do a removal of duplicate addresses in the some of the more robust analysis that we do when we pull out the address files. So most likely those addresses that you've entered multiple times will be removed when we do the analysis. Wouldn't be worried too much about that at the moment. The third question related to when we expect this, I think it's supposed to be in around September if all goes well, along with all these other functionalities that we're talking about here.
Thank you, Ryan. So at this time, I'm not seeing any other questions in the queue. Vinny, I don't see any other raised hands in the audible section of answering questions. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Great. So at this time, just to kind of repeat for folks, resources. You can find resources both in NSP website as well as the OneSpeedy website. The NSP website, you can still locate a slew of resources, including all the training materials. This will be posted on there, and that guidance document that we talked about that helps people with performance measures and accomplishment information. We'll go ahead and also send that guidance piece out to everyone that was active on this call, so you can have that in hand at the end of this. And also for your ask a question and or technical assistance, you can do both. You can ask a question that you get usually a turnaround quite quickly in the system right now, as long as it's not too policy heavy. And feel free to ask any questions through that. And if you need a little bit more support, you want some hands-on, please go ahead and ask for technical assistance and describe what your needs are. At this point, Vinny, I'll hand it off to you to ask people, to tell people how to go ahead and do the survey.
Sure. So unfortunately, we can't make this link active that you see before you, but by tomorrow, when we send out the guidance doc and the thank you for attending, we will include this feedback link. And we appreciate your feedback and working out the kinks with us today on this new webinar software.
Thank you. Anything else, Ryan, Jennifer, that you need to add in here?
No, I just want to, if there are specific DRGR questions, you can, again, either submit them to the AAQ, or if they're super urgent, you can submit them to me at ryan.d as in David, .Flannery, that's F as in Frank, L-A-N-E-R-Y, at HUD.gov. So it's ryan.d.Flannery at HUD.gov, especially for those of you that I said just go ahead and email me about it. Feel free, and then we can work through some of those issues.
Great, and make sure too, if you guys, when you're looking at that affordability screens that we talked about, if you have any additional comments or ideas, including some of the great idea I thought today on what they'd like to see in a canned performance report, feel free to also send those on to Ryan, and they'll collect that information and do their best to see if they can make any changes and adapt as needed.
And if you'd like to, if you'd like to be a tester, we're always looking for testers as well.
Great point. Testing as well. Don't hesitate to throw your name in the hat. So this will conclude the webinar for today. Thanks everyone for their time, and please keep on notice for future webinars that are coming up. Thank you so much.
Thanks everyone.